Admissions in higher ed is stuck. Outdated tools and rigid processes slow institutions down, making it harder to truly connect with today's students. But Brittany at the College of Albemarle shows that there's a better way.
At College of the Albemarle, we're always looking for new ways to better serve our students. Let's face it, though, life doesn't always fit into a 9-to-5 schedule. That's why we've been so excited about the AI tools we get to use through our CRM, Element 451. This makes connecting to COA easier than ever. We're working on Bolt AI Assistance, Bolt Discovery, and these are tools designed to give students access to COA resources and information anytime, day or night. Got a question about admissions? Need help exploring programs? Looking for resources? These tools are like having COA staff at your fingertips, ready to help whenever it's convenient for you.
Your prospective students get the information they need when they need it, and your team saves time. Visit element451.com to see how AI can help you simplify your admissions process to stay focused on what really matters, your students. Welcome to AI for You. Today's use case comes to us from Mike Kaput of the Marketing AI Institute. If you do any speaking or presenting to groups or to your team, you can benefit from a presenting coach. You can record a video of yourself giving all or part of your presentation, upload it to the paid version of Google AI Studio, and run the prompt to get some good pointers. The prompt is in the show notes. You have to use the paid version of Google AI Studio because of the large context window required for video. I uploaded a 35-minute video and it had no problem evaluating it. But you could also use a variation of this prompt to evaluate a podcast or audio recording in the free version of Google AI Studio. This prompt is a perfect transition for our guest today because she is an incredible speaker, among other things. Tracy Playle is the CEO and Chief Content Strategist at Pickle Jar Communications, as well as the author of The Connected Campus, a must-read book about content strategy for higher education. She is also the creator of the Content Ed community. I always learn so much every time I talk with Tracy, so let's jump right in. Welcome to AI for You, the go-to podcast for higher ed professionals looking to integrate AI into their daily work. I'm your host, Brian Piper, the Director of Content Strategy and Assessment at the University of Rochester. Join me every other Thursday for practical uses of AI within higher education communications, marketing, and student engagement. We'll focus on ways to quickly integrate AI into your teams to increase your efficiency and effectiveness and help you optimize your workflows and processes. I'll interview experts and feature relevant use cases with the goal that every episode gives you at least one thing you can take away and start leveraging in your job today. AI for You is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I've been excited about doing this for a while.
So tell the listeners a little bit about what you do at Pickle Jar.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Pickle Jar and the chief content strategist. So most of the work that I do is in the space of helping schools, colleges, and universities with their approach to content, experience design, communications, broadly speaking. I'm also the founder of the Content Ed community as well. So we run the annual conference focusing on that and look after the online Content Ed community as well.
And so how are you integrating AI into your workflows at Pickle Jar?
Yeah, so we're using them in a few different ways, and I'd separate them out from the way in which I'm using them personally as a company CEO and in my own work, versus the way in which I might be using them for and with clients and institutions that we're working with. So
There are three main different ways that we're probably using them and exploring most at the moment. We do a lot of audience research work at Pickle Jar to inform content strategies. So we've been exploring it quite a lot in that area. So anything from looking at the way in which we can use tools to help us to conduct the audience research and gather that research, through to processing the findings of them. And that can be anything from survey results and data through to scripts from interviews that we might have conducted with people. So things like helping us to identify patterns and trends that might come up over multiple different transcripts, or even just synthesizing that information for us, which can often be quite large from very, very large data sets, and doing that and processing it that way. So lots of it in the audience research. I personally like using it in things like taking the data and then turning it into personas, or identifying different kind of motivational tribes within audience groups, or noticing patterns around what content needs might be, so that we can start to design content architectures around what some of those different kind of clusters of information needs might be. Other areas where we're using it, the obvious one when we're working in content is content creation. So I tend to be using it a lot for what I would refer to as content co-creation. So I'm not always having it write entirely the original content for me or create the original content, but I am extensively co-creating content with it. So recently I'm working on a brand messaging and narrative piece for a client. And we've developed the overall kind of approach to it, but we've come up with this concept of wanting to have different volumes of to what extent we go with that messaging approach, through like a really kind of, bold approach where and I probably can't say exactly what it is because it's in development at the moment, but where, the messaging comes out really strong, to a much more kind of quiet and subtle approach. And so for me, being able to brief, in this case, ChatGPT, on what is the messaging and the narrative approach? Here's some core content that we've written. Now, can you rewrite that for me in these different volumes? So like a kind of a low and medium and a high volume, and have it do a really, really effective job of that. So kind of partnering on that content creation side of things, and using it a lot for ideation as well. I've kind of got to a stage now where I'm probably not frustrated or fed up with my own creativity, but just impatient with it. Because I find that if I can co-create and co-ideate with a generative AI tool, that creativity happens so much faster for me. So now I almost don't spend any time trying to think of ideas myself. I will just jump straight into a partnership with AI, have it co-ideate with something for me, and then I'll take it myself and build on what the ideation might be from there. And then the third area that we use it a lot is around, what we might almost call like the agent side of using AI. So almost treating it like a marketing assistant, or, another PA that works with me, or things like that, and using it much more for some of the administrative tasks like reformatting things, analyzing meetings, creating task lists for me, those kind of things.
It's fascinating how you said when you co-create with it. It's interesting how using these tools as a partner kind of removes a lot of that quiet time, or that time where you're waiting for the next idea to hit or the next inspiration to hit. If you can establish that back and forth with the tools, then all of a sudden it's like it accelerates your brainstorming.
Definitely. It's become like my second shower. So I'm very much a shower ideas person, right? So like that's where they come to me. And I've been telling myself forever, I need one of those writable notepads in the shower, right? Because that's often where I get my best, or when I'm walking my dogs. So it's like having a second shower now, where I can just, get those ideas really, really quickly. I know so many people are worried that the AI kind of like takes away from our creativity or negates it, but for me it doesn't. It actually accelerates it quite significantly. And I think over the last couple of years I use it a lot when I'm preparing talks. Like you, I do a lot of speaking at conferences, and for me it's really, really helped me to get an access point to storytelling. I often just want a little story, a little synopsis of a story that I can tell just to illustrate a point. And I can't read every single book there is out there on all of these amazing stories, but AI can partner with me to find those stories and to help me illustrate points with storytelling really, really powerfully, to the point where I think the quality of the talks that I'm giving has just gone up exponentially over the last year or so because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So you do a lot of work with a variety of different institutions of all sizes. So when you're in working with these institutions and talking with them about AI, what do you think some of the biggest challenges are that face higher ed when it comes to integrating AI?
I think we're at a really difficult moment in time right now because there are a lot of factors that are influencing higher ed that are actually nothing to do with AI, but create great opportunities for us, i.e. financial downturn at night, particularly in the UK sector, right? We've been hit so hard right now by declining student numbers. And this is not just a UK problem, but declining student numbers, the impact on the financial situation. And inevitable redundancies, restructures and changes in teams come in as a consequence of that, along with the pressure to produce more and perform better as well in our roles. And the challenge that's presenting for us at the moment is really just giving people the time and the creative space to actually think and explore in terms of using these tools. And that's such a shame because right now those tools could be the thing that really, really helps us transform everything. So that's one of the biggest barriers that I see, just people making the creative space and the time to be able to experiment, explore, and actually start using them in more practical ways. I think one of the, some of the other barriers are around, we have a need and for good reasons to develop policies of best practices approaches within our institutions, and we should have those. But I think sometimes the need to lay those foundations might actually be getting in the way of our ability to innovate a little bit. So there's this kind of period of, we'll wait until the university has developed its policy on this before we will progress our use of it. And I think that's kind of wasted time, and it also prevents our ability to develop an effective policy as well, because if we're not in there hands-on experimenting with these tools, how can we actually develop policies? So one of the things that is frustrating me at the moment is almost a barrier that seems to be like keeping at a surface level of talking conceptually about AI without actually using it from a practical perspective as well, in terms of really, really embedding it. So, those barriers are time. There's definitely a lot of barriers around fear, and they come from a good and valid place. Our fears around bias, our fears around sustainability, and the carbon impact of using AI tools. And I think it's right for us to be considering those. But I think if we use those as an excuse not to use the tools, then we are shooting ourselves in the foot. And the third barrier that I don't think we're talking about enough actually is we have a lot of data in higher ed, but we don't always have a lot of data that is clean, that is good, that is properly pre-processed for us to be able to use with AI and machine learning tools. So I think that's a bit of a barrier, and we don't often realize just how much work needs to go into the pre-processing of that data before we can use it really effectively with these tools as well. And I think that kind of time commitment is perhaps a barrier as well.
Yeah, I think those are all absolutely valid reasons for the slowdown of adoption. I think a lot of it also is, I think there's an issue with the lack of understanding, especially with the
Totally.
leadership side of things. And I'm always saying how these are really change management projects. These are not technology projects. And I think a lot of times leadership is willing to say, okay, yes, we should be using AI more. And then it becomes kind of like surface level use of AI. But if you look at some of these institutions who have really leaned in and created resources and funding and staffed AI as an initiative, they're using it in a much more impactful, like deep integrated way. So I think it's really look at how we can make this, a bigger project and really make this a change management project. And I think it's, so much of that I think is awareness and just talking about it.
I totally agree. And I really love I think it's Arizona State University, or I think you've spoken to various people there on the podcast and in other places, but some of the work that they're doing in this space is brilliant. And I love how they've got their framework around, I think there are 3 strategic priorities and their partnership with OpenAI. And in order for you to get an enterprise account on it, you have to, your project needs to be aligned with these 3 strategic objectives that they're putting out. And I think that's a really nice way of framing it and allowing the space for experimentation that's actually aligned to strategic priorities. And I think that's key. But your point about senior leaders not necessarily understanding it, I think is crucial. And I think, in the content space, as a content professional, what I've seen and had a few conversations about is almost an assumption, and I'm going to use the term over enthusiasm just because I kind of think it's a beautiful thing and I love that enthusiasm, but it's almost like an over optimism about what it can do for us at this moment in time. So there's an assumption that recommendation engines and machine learning tools can just take all of this content that we've already got on our websites and suddenly turn it into an incredibly personalized experience for end users. And what senior leaders don't always understand is that in order for that to happen, we actually have to switch to using very highly structured content. We need to structure our content in ways in which if we're using a WYSIWYG editor type approach, we just don't have that foundation laid. We need the audience insights in order to know what the personalized experience needs to look like. And we need a really, really robust taxonomy in place in order to be able to tell and instruct like how that content needs to behave. And that without those foundations, and, we could partner with AI to actually lay those foundations and to create structured content and to help us, develop out our taxonomies and all of that. But without those foundations in place, we actually can't make these really amazing experiences happen, no matter how good AI might be. So I think we need to sometimes one and the same time, both nurture and nourish that enthusiasm amongst senior leaders for what the potential of AI is, especially when it's aligned to our strategic objectives, but also temper their enthusiasm a little bit and help them to become educated in just how this works, almost from a component workflow perspective, as well.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see so many more institutions as they start leaning into AI more discover that the real problem they have is a data and content organization problem and not so much AI integration.
Yeah, completely. And governance problems, right? And all of that good stuff that we know can really, really lay the foundations. And I think, investment in those areas just lays such a good foundation for us to be able to do really, really cool things with machine learning.
Yeah, for sure. And you were talking about how important it is to connect the strategy to the use of the tools. And as you know, it's easy to go down a rabbit hole with all the fun things that these tools can do. But if you're not tying those to strategic goals, then, you can waste a lot of time by playing.
Definitely. But then there's a lot of space for us to play with it in our personal lives as well. Like you and I have discussed before, from coming up with those recipes, that is one of my favorite examples that you use of it. To, I don't know, just helping me think about how to organize my week or, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're talking with these institutions, if you're working with an institution that hasn't done anything with AI, that really hasn't started, what do you recommend for them as far as getting started?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, they are few and far between now, I think, in terms of, institutions that haven't tried anything. But what I am finding a lot of is ones that, or at least individuals or teams that have tried a little bit, had a terrible experience with it, decided that the output is not good, and have therefore said, we're going to put that on the back burner for a while, right? So there's a few things that I tell them. I mean, firstly, having them really recognize and understand that AI is not going to be and going to behave like the most expert professional in that field and that container, and that we need to relate to them more. The analogy that I've heard other people use is a little bit like an intern or someone like that that's just starting to get to know. I mean, I give a talk on AI, and I have this image of a taxidermy lion from Frederick I of Sweden, where he had these lions stuffed by a taxidermist that has never seen a lion. So all he was given was kind of, this pile of skin and bones, and didn't know what a lion looked like other than having seen it in heraldry. And the picture of this lion's hilarious, right? And the point that I make is that, working with generative AI is a little bit like working with a taxidermist that's never seen a lion, right? And that is, but we have higher expectations of it. The first thing that I talk about is the need to manage our expectations, but also for us as institutions to get really, really good at what I refer to as precision briefing, which is a slightly more fancy and accessible way of saying prompt engineering, but is really pointing to the need for us to get a lot clearer in how we brief and what we actually want the outcomes to be. As a consultant that's served the education sector for the last 17 plus years now, and I've worked in it for over 20 years, I receive a lot of briefs from universities. And, generally, sadly, those briefs are not very clear in terms of what they actually want the outcomes and the outputs to be. And that's okay when we're dealing with a human and figuring that out, although it can be quite costly when the brief is not clear. I think AI is going to force us just to turn that dial up even more. So recognize its limitations, get really, really clear on what we're asking it to do, and also just identify those priorities in terms of really thinking about how it might make a difference. But I think also just starting small and starting in areas that don't feel like you're going to be publishing lots of AI generated content online immediately, but instead starting with reformatting that bullet point list that you need to, or taking a transcript from a meeting and just developing some action points for it and things like that. So there are kind of 6 different areas where I encourage people to almost look for the tasks that they might conduct in their teams or in their institutions as places to look for your first kind of exploring with using AI. So those 6 are, and I've got them written down in front of me so I don't forget them. Look at tasks that are repetitive. Look at tasks that are boring, that we human beings would actually be quite happy to do away with. Look at tasks that might need to be done 24/7, that we human beings just don't have the energy or the hours to be able to do. Look for tasks that are easily to train in being able to do them. They're trainable. Look for tasks that are at a low risk of harm in terms of the outputs that we might produce. And then lastly, also look for tasks where there might be a level of complexity that the human brain actually can't cope with. As well. So analysing those giant data sets where we humans just can't always notice the patterns in them. So those are the kind of 6 areas where I encourage people to look for those things to start with as a place to kind of play with it.
Yeah, those are great. I love that. I love that list. I will definitely be adopting that. So now let's look out at institutions who have been using this for a while. So what are some of the most innovative or interesting use cases you've seen of AI that you've been surprised at or you thought were really impactful for the institution?
I worry that my answer to this question is going to be a bit of a cop-out to anyone that's listened to every single episode of this podcast so far, because most of my examples come from people that you've spoken to on this podcast, Brian. So the answer is basically, if you haven't listened to any of the preceding episodes before mine, just listen to all of those and you're going to find great use cases, right? But I'll flag up a few of my favorites and some of the ones and explorations that I've seen and explored with myself. So I love examples where people, and this is one that I'm doing myself at the moment, are essentially trying to create a replica of a human being using AI, right? It's almost like exactly what, when we think of artificial intelligence, it kind of should be, and almost like the movie representation of it, right? So it is to have an AI behave like a human being. So it touches a little bit on the agent side of where we think AI is going at the moment. But the ones that I love, you had someone on the podcast, I'm sure, that was talking about how they had created a version of, I think it was the director of learning technology in their institution. And they basically, uploaded lots of transcripts of talks that they're given at conferences, presentations they've given, blog posts that they might have written, thought leadership pieces, and essentially create, I think it was a custom GPT in that case, to behave like that person. So when that person's not available, you can fire questions at that GPT and it will then behave like that person. I'm trying to create a Tracy clone at the moment using a custom GPT where I've uploaded the contents of my book, blog posts that I've written. Increasingly, I'm trying to collect transcripts of talks and uploading it to that, with the primary objective at the moment as being my marketing assistant, to have me kind of co-write things, but in my tone of voice, using my ideas that I have created and written in my book or have stolen from other people and put in my book, but hey. And so that has been a really, really good use case that I love. And, I've also done that for clients as well, where I've created a chat bot that essentially is my client with, recordings of meetings and all of that. So I can fire questions at it. So that's one of my use cases that I really, really love. And I think it's kind of cool. And I think there's some real potential around that in terms of us thinking about student experience and interactions with prospective students. Now, I know at the moment there's some studies out there that I think show that prospective students are They want to talk to a real person. They don't necessarily want to be talking to a bot, but they would still rather be talking to a chat bot that is designed to act like a human being than they would to not talk to anybody. It's still turning that dial up a little bit in terms of that. The other use case, and this is one that we've been exploring a lot at Pickle Jar. So I've got a little bit of a bias in sharing this one, but we built, and it was a pretty simple build as well. We built a chat bot essentially that works as like an AI research assistant for a university. So we uploaded and kind of ring fenced lots of audience research data from various different sources, survey data, reports, interviews, and we conducted a lot of research as well to fill in a lot of the gaps. Uploaded that into a chatbot system and essentially created a system where anyone that works in content, communications, marketing around that university can now go to that chatbot and ask questions about audiences. They might want to know what is this demographic of our audience interested in hearing about? What are their priorities? What content works with that audience? They can just go and ask those questions off the chatbot. So it really opens up the access to a lot of that brilliant audience research that we have within our institutions that typically only just sit within the department that's commissioned them, and kind of democratizes it in a way, but also keeps it ring fenced so that it is just that data that the system's actually accessing. So those, I think, are, some pretty powerful ways, and everything else from a creativity perspective. Like, I love the person that you had on the podcast that spoke about how they had used the institution's brand guidelines and the campus map to recreate a campus tour.
Yeah, Bart.
That's just brilliant. What a fabulous use of this. I loved it. So yeah, listen to all of your previous episodes.
Think you know ChatGPT? Think again. Unlock advanced features like projects and Canvas at the AI Engage Summit's ChatGPT Secrets session on February 26th. You'll be able to implement what you learn immediately. This free virtual event is a must attend. Register now at enrollify.org/engage. I always appreciate the plug, Tracy, but we know that this technology is changing rapidly and evolving very quickly. Where do you see this going in the next year or two, and what are you hopeful for, or what are you worried about?
I think one of the first area of things that we're going to see is quite rapid improvement in terms of what it produces. But I don't think that's entirely going to come from developments within the LLMs themselves. And now I'm just talking about generative AI here. I'm not talking about the wider range of AI and machine learning tools and applications we could be looking at. But it's going to improve in quality because we get better at that precision briefing. Not necessarily because and of course the LLMs are improving all the time anyway, but I think there's that, it's going to improve through the partnership of it. So I think that's what we're going to see. And alongside that, I think we're increasingly going to see requirements, and I'm thinking about this myself from my own hiring processes at Pickle Jar, but requirements for people to have what I'm referring to as AI literacy in their space so that we can use these tools better. So that's actually nothing about the tools themselves. And actually my hope and my prediction for, us just as professionals. So I think we'll see that. I think we'll see a lot more job descriptions have it written as a requirement that people have a degree of AI literacy in their space and probably some kind of training within that. In terms of the tools themselves, I think one of the most rapid spaces that we're going to see developments in is in multimedia. So particularly in the growth of AI tools for video creation, video editing, like they are moving at pace at the moment. They're phenomenal in terms of what they're doing, especially in areas like translation. I think this is one area that can just transform things in higher education. At the moment, there is so much focus from an international student perspective on institutions that deliver their programs in English as the primary learning language. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have tools that are good enough that no longer becomes a concern, that people can, study at an English speaking institution with no knowledge of the English language, because translation tools will be so good, even with very, very specialist lexicons in there, that it will be able to cope with it. And that to me actually opens up an interesting challenge for the Anglo-speaking institutions that have dominance on the international recruitment market, because I think people will start to go elsewhere where they don't need to be able to speak the native language to be able to cope. So that's kind of, a few years out yet, but Lots of improvements in video, lots of improvements in voice. I think we're going to see a lot more development of very bespoke applications of AI tools, more and more. So instead of just like the very generalist large language models that we have at the moment, we'll start to see a lot more evolution around ones that are specifically designed for, and some of them exist, right? Specifically designed for helping create SEO content, or specifically designed for marketing uses, or specifically designed for podcast co-creation or things like that. And then, I know that one of the areas you talk about a lot at the moment is around the agentic AI and this kind of growth of agents popping up. And it's certainly, if you believe what your adverts in your newsfeed kind of tell you at the moment, that looks like the growth area. The area that I think we're going to see more development on that is, again, on bespoke approaches to that. Is actually not necessarily in us buying into these tools that claim to be creative, but us getting better at creating them ourselves within the tools that already exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really goes back to change management, and it's a mind shift of really, instead of thinking about our workflow processes and the way we currently do things, it's rethinking what we need to take care of and what we need ownership of and what we can release. Because I think these tools and these models are getting to the point where they can do a lot of things. So it's up to us to decide what they should be doing and what we still need oversight for, what we still need human strategy, creative judgment over within our workflows, and where we need to put those kind of stopgaps in. How much access do you want to give these tools, and how much leeway do you want to give them to just go out and do things on your behalf? It's going to be a tricky road to navigate. And I think we're going to see a lot of extreme failures on both sides of that.
But one of the things I'm really curious about with this and excited about is the potential for the upturn in human brilliance as a consequence of this. Because I think we often talk about, and people are concerned about, like AI taking over the human creativity or just doing it all for us. And only the other day I almost got into the trap of arguing with someone on the internet about this, but chose in one of my more enlightened moments not to go there. But people going, oh, why would you use these tools? They're just going to numb your brain, and your brain's not. But for me, like, it takes away all of the numb brain, the brain numbing stuff that I have to do already, that probably takes up, at least half of my brain power, and allows me to focus on other things. And as I say, even just speaking for myself, I think my own quality of my personally human created outputs have increased so much because I'm able to take away the brain numbing stuff with AI tools instead. And so for me, the exciting thing is just how much more human potential we're going to tap into because we have these tools that can actually free up our space to be able to improve ourselves.
I love that. And that's a theme that keeps coming up on the show when I'm talking to people is the more we use these AI tools, it allows us to be more human. It gives us more time to create those personal interactions and connections. So that's great. So within yours, I always finish up with this question. Within your workflows, within your job, within your life, what different AI use cases have been the most helpful or the most surprising to you?
I think back to the moment that a couple of years ago when I was starting to explore this, where I kind of realized this is something that I am really excited about in terms of how it will transform my ways of working. And so it's actually in those brain numbing areas, right? It's in those really mundane tasks. And one of my earliest uses of it was related to the Utterly Content conference that we run, online conference. And it was something really insignificant. I was creating the sponsor page to, encourage companies to sponsor the conference. And for that, I needed to generate a list of who are the types of people that have attended this conference. And we had a delegate list from the year previous that had 600, 700 names on it and their job titles. And I needed to process that data. And of course, none of us, we don't have identical job titles. So, doing some of the searching and sifting tools on a spreadsheet was not going to do that job for me. So just running that spreadsheet through ChatGPT, I guess it was back then, 2 years ago, was probably the primary tool I was using. And just asking it, can you firstly identify patterns in this? Then can you sort this list almost by seniority of job title? Then can you create a list for me of all the different countries that people are coming from? And just doing that. And I remember it gave me a list, and it was a numbered list. And I didn't want it as a numbered list. I wanted it as a bullet point. So I remember sitting there, copying and pasting the numbered list across into a document, and me manually starting to change the formatting of it. And then suddenly going, I don't need to manually change this. I can actually ask this to do this for me. Right. And I know it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's those moments when I'm about to do something that is going to take me an unnecessarily long amount of time to just go back to it and just say, can you just do that for me? So for me, it really is like just in those admin tasks, it's helping me to get started on something. It's if I'm writing a blog post or creating a new talk, it's like, can you just give me 5 ideas just to get my creativity started and then to fill in those gaps? So that co-creation, that co-ideation phase is definitely the area that is completely transformative in how I work. To the point where I kind of, and I have to catch myself, I get a little bit frustrated with people that don't do these things now. Like one of my team last week was trying to rewrite an award entry from the Content Ed Awards and rewrite it into a case study. And we've got a structure for the case studies mapped out. And I'm sitting there looking at them. They're going, oh, this one's really long. It's going to take really long. I'm sitting there going, but you can just put it into ChatGPT and it will do it for you. And they're kind of, they're a little bit resistant about using some of these tools for ethical reasons, which I have to respect. But, still I'm sitting there thinking, this is taking you hours and it would take me 5 minutes, to do that just as a start point. So yeah, it's just in those really, really quick areas of my life where I just don't want to spend the time doing that thing that I'm just going to get it to do it for me.
I love that. And that captures perfectly that mind shift change of just looking at what you're doing and saying, can these tools make this easier? So I love it.
I think that's it. I think that question and just having that question front of mind, whether, for some people that might even need to be a Post-it note on their screen, right, to remind them, could this tool be doing this for me? Is just such a critical tool that we just need to keep coming back to. And we just need to dismantle the assumptions that we have around what needs a human being to do it.
Absolutely, for sure. Always have so much fun talking with you, Tracy. If members of the audience want to talk with you, where are the best places for them to connect with you?
I'm everywhere, and because I have such a distinctive surname as well, I'm easy to find. So if you search on any platform for Tracy Playle, so Tracy Playle, you're going to find me. LinkedIn is probably one of the platforms that I'm most active on. And I'd be amiss if I also didn't give a bit of a plug for the Content Ed community as well, which is free for anyone to join. So I'm very, very active on there because I kind of, look after the community. So that's if you go to plus.contentedlive.com, you'll find me and hundreds of other content professionals in the education sector hanging out there as well and sharing lots of thoughts and webinars and all kinds of stuff there as well.
It is a fantastic community. And I will also, of course, recommend your book, which is fantastic and a valuable resource for anyone in higher ed doing any sort of content creation, content strategy.
Thank you for remembering to give the plug that I should have probably given myself.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Tracy. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and knowledge with us.
Thanks, Brian.
So many insights packed into 35 minutes. Tracy's perspective on using AI as a co-creator is both helpful and practical. One of the biggest challenges with this technology is figuring out how to interact with it in the most effective manner. And I love the comment about AI becoming her second shower. From leveraging AI for audience research to using it for content ideation and personalized messaging, Tracy's approach reminds us that AI isn't just a tool, it's a partner in innovation. Tracy pointed out that precision in our prompts is essential, and clarity around our goals is critical for maximizing the value of these tools in a strategic and impactful way. If you're considering how AI can transform your institution's workflows, don't wait for the perfect policies or big budgets. Start with low-risk tasks, experiment with automation, and build from there. Thank you for tuning into AI for You. Please subscribe, share, or leave us a review. It really helps us reach more high ed professionals just like you. And as always, blue skies and keep creating. Thank you for listening to another episode of AI for You. I hope you found at least one useful thing you can take away and start adding to your workflows and processes today. Remember, the key to making the most of AI is to keep experimenting, keep learning, and of course, keep creating. AI for You is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Kadu, Day Kibbles, Shane Baglini, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.